It is heartwarming for me to know that as the seniors opened up their yearbooks, that they immediately turned to the page that is customarily held for me as head of school to write a farewell address. I'm moved by that. No, they didn't actually do that. As a matter of fact, how many of you know I even have a page in there? That's supposed to be read about 7 years from now. But what's most important is not my thoughts, but the thoughts of this year's commencement speaker, Deacon Carl Buter, class of 1966. We used Deacon Buter's quotes in the Winter magazine and also in the yearbook on that page. I thought I'd give the community a chance to hear him live. Just 2 weeks ago, Deacon Buter celebrated his 50th reunion, and we were honored that he was here and also participated in Mass and delivered a homily. So thank you for coming back in such short notice. Thank you. When you hear where he's from, you'll realize it's not easy to get here. Following his 4 years at Marianapolis, Deacon Buter attended Assumption College, where he received a BA in political science and minors in philosophy and theology. He went on to receive a master's degree in public administration from the University of Hartford in 1976. After his graduation from Assumption College in 1970, Deacon Buter began work as an adult probation officer with the state of Connecticut. He was assigned to the drug treatment unit after completion of coursework at the Drug Dependent Institute at Yale University. He was appointed in 1974, he was appointed as United States probation officer in the U.S. District Court in Hartford, Connecticut, where he specialized in narcotics enforcement and treatment in matters of probation, parole, and military parole. After 11 years in the criminal justice system and drug enforcement, Deacon Buter was ready for a change. In 1981, Deacon Buter and his wife Lynn purchased properties that would become the Thorncroft Inn on Martha's Vineyard, which they still own and operate. Over the past 35 years, the Buters have owned multiple properties on the island, including 2 other lodging establishments. Both Lynn and Carl are also active real estate brokers in addition to their innkeeping duties. Since moving to the island, Deacon Buter has been active in local civic affairs. He was a 3-term president of Martha's Vineyard's Chamber of Commerce and president of Babe Ruth Youth Baseball, Pop Warner Youth Baseball, and Martha Vineyard's junior high school football team. In 2002, he entered formation for the permanent diaconate program in the Diocese of Fall River, Massachusetts. After 5 years of theological study, he was ordained in October of 2007. He was assigned to the Good Shepherd Parish and ministers primarily to the Brazilian immigrant community. Ladies and gentlemen, Deacon Carl Buter.
Head of School Joe Hanrahan, Father Timothy Roth, Board Chair Dan Atwood, family and friends of the class of 2016, and members of the class of 2016. I am profoundly honored and humbled to be standing in front of you today. Graduates, I am positively incredulous that I sat where you now sit a half a century ago. A half a century. My sons would say that was back when the earth was flat. Now, despite this considerable passage of time, I think there is much that we share in common. Allow me a bit of reflection. When I sat there, I was itching to move on from Marianapolis. After 4 years, it was time to go. At Marianapolis, I was, as you are today, blessed by an excellent academic education. Your lives are full of promise, focused beyond these gates. You have been well educated for the future. Science, mathematics, languages, and history, with technical proficiency and artistic appreciation. And from the moment you set foot on these hallowed grounds, Marianapolis has been preparing you for this day, for your departure. When I sat where you now sit at that stage of my life, my eyes were set straight ahead, down the road of life that seemed to stretch before me like an endless ribbon of road. I didn't glance in the rear view mirror of life because at the age of 17, there was simply not much for me to see in the past. My life was all in front of me. That is how it should have been for me. That is how it is for you today. College, marriage, graduate school, and the beginnings of a career followed. But eventually, I became dissatisfied. By that time, I frequently used alcohol to excess. I was in the middle of a 27-year absence from the Catholic Church and an even longer absence from Marianapolis. My wife and I were doing quite well financially, but I wasn't happy. I was seeking something that I could neither define nor identify. I could not find it in alcohol. I could not find it in material acquisitions. By all outward signs and measurements of the material world, I was wildly successful. But there was a hole in my heart that I could not fill with money, possession, power, or prestige. There are some specific dates in all of our lives that we will never forget. Today may be one of those dates for you. One of the dates that I will never forget was Rake Day in my sophomore year. Just after lunch, I was raking near the gazebo, right over there. And one of my classmates, forget whom, came running out from the main door of the old main building. And he was shouting something. And we couldn't make it out. It was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. On November 22nd. (1963). What he was trying to tell us was that President Kennedy had just been assassinated. There are some days you never forget. One of those days for me was March 31st, 1985. For the first time in decades, I looked into the rear view mirror of my life. I was drawn back here to my days at Marianapolis, especially to 3 priests who had greatly influenced my life. Moral men who corrected me when I needed it. Father Albin Gerkles taught freshman algebra. And for the first marking period, he gave me a C. That's the first grade under an A I had ever received. I was horrified, and I went to see him. He told me that I did not have natural mathematical ability, and that if I wanted to succeed, I would have to work a lot harder in his class. Ooh, that was a rude awakening, but true. Similarly, during my senior year, I wanted to apply to Dartmouth College, and for all the wrong reasons, mostly related to my ego, because I already had a scholarship to Assumption College. Father John Petrauskas, the headmaster at the time, said that I barely met the minimum requirements for admission to Dartmouth. Oh, he was right, and I was not being true to myself. Perhaps most profoundly, though, Father Casimir Kukl, great giant of a man, met me on the side lawn on the morning of the terrible fire that destroyed the old main building during my sophomore year. The exact spot was just about where the chapel is now. He told me that my collection of numerous oil paintings and sculptures, I was an artist at the time, was in the main building, and it was en route from the Scholastic Art Awards in Hartford. "Oh no!" I exclaimed. He looked at me very sternly, and he put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, "Son, keep it in perspective, because Brother Ulix died in the fire." Time to grow up. Time for maturity. These men stood for truth, integrity, and for the other person, never for themselves. The conscience within me that they helped to form finally awakened. March 31st, 1985. That began a life-altering process that took many years. It led me back to the church. And may I assure you that the sacrament of reconciliation after 27 years was most interesting. And it ultimately led me to the sacrament of ordination and back to Marianapolis. One of the proudest days of my life was June 7th, 2009. One of those days you never forget. That was the last time I saw Father John Petrauskas, the former headmaster, at Matchelitis Nursing Home. I knelt next to his wheelchair. And I told him that because of men like him, I could answer God's call to ordination. Earlier I told you that we have much in common. Of course, we share an excellent classical and preparatory education. But much more than that, we share an education in the Catholic tradition that has given us well-formed consciences. No matter how far you stray from the path that God has laid out for you in life, a well-formed conscience will eventually bring you back on track. It's the moral compass that a Catholic education, a Marianapolis education, has given you that you cannot get in a secular learning environment. Graduates, you will go forth today with your eyes fixed firmly on the road ahead. This is as it should be. But in future days and years, glance occasionally into the rear view mirror of your lives. Certainly earlier and more often than I did. You will appreciate more and more that your Marianapolis education has given you an excellent academic experience, but of greater importance, you have received the building blocks of a life of true moral integrity. May God bless and keep you all.